Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the class, Children's and Adolescent Literature. Um, it's a wonderful class. I've been teaching it for a little more than a year now, and it's probably my favorite of all the courses that I teach in English. But I wanted to spend a few moments, well, probably more than that, because I've learned that I'm not very brief, talking about the syllabus and expectations, what I expect of you and what you expect of me. And the other thing is to kind of break the stigma of online courses. As a student, I never liked them because most of the time I never even knew what my professor looked like, and everything that was in the main frame of like the blackboard just seemed really really rigid. And I don't want you to have that same experience. I want you to have a better experience than maybe what you've had in other courses. And I do want you to be able to walk away from this, since most of you are education majors and many of you are going to work with children, to walk away with some information and new skill sets that are going to be invaluable to you as you move on into your careers. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about the course, talking about the syllabus, and different things that I think are very, very important so that you can be as successful as you possibly can. So you've already seen in the blackboard, there's a spot there for the syllabus. So I'm going to work through it all, so just kind of follow along with me. The first is my name. My name is Denny Johnson. I have been teaching here at the junior college at Southwest Texas Junior College for 2.5, almost 3 years, and then working with RGC on the Children's and Adolescent Literature course for a little more than a year. I've taught the course face to face. I've also taught it as a web course. Both of them I've had a great time with and interacting with students. Now, I'm easy to find. I have an email address. It's on the syllabus, and you know how to work the things in a blackboard. You can send me an email. And I've also added my office phone number here, 830-758-4137. That rings right to my desk at my office over at the junior college. I try to make sure that I'm accessible to you, even beyond what it's listed here as my office hours. Now, although for a course like this as an adjunct, I'm really not required to have those office hours, but I want to make sure that you have the same access to me that any other student would. So my office is at the junior college, once again, in the A building, and it's A109. So if you're walking in the front door from the little parking lot in the front, as soon as you walk in, and some of you are very familiar with the campus here, as soon as you walk in off to the right, there's a door that says instructors. Just walk through that glass door, and I'm at the end of the hallway. I'm the only one that's really in here. That's next to the little kitchen. So if the door's open, come on in. If the door's not, then knock on it. I may be in here anyway, but most of the time my door is open. So I'm here fairly early in the morning. I get here 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you can come by anytime you need to. So, or you can call or email, and I will get back to you. I do pride myself on trying to get back to you as quickly as possible. I'm never going to be the one that leaves you hanging for days or weeks or just blows you off to answer. So if you need to talk to me, please try to. Don't just live with whatever issue you've got. Make sure that you contact me. But anyway, my office hours here are listed here. Monday and Wednesday, 8 to 10, 12 to 2, 4 to 6. And the gaps in between those is because I'm in class here. So, and I have a couple of other responsibilities also here at the college, but for the most part, I try to be available to you. Now, the thing about the course, and many of you are taking this as education majors, so you can't get away from it. You're kind of a hostage. But the course is really about learning to interpret and understand, and really to be able to evaluate literature that we're presenting to our children and presenting to our young adults. Reading is a big part of education. But if we can read and comprehend what we read, that's going to make us successful. And that needs to be our goal in education, no matter the age of the student. And so this course, you're going to learn to interpret, analyze, and evaluate literature that's presented or marketed to specifically children and adolescents. Now, the selections, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes, run the gamut of genres and types and styles and formats. Um, Anything from your basic storybooks, the picture books that maybe we read to our children or those that we remember as children, all the way through full-blown novels. And we'll find in many cases that many of these novels were not necessarily written to children, but they end up there, or they end up marketed that way. Now, this is an English class, which brings us to the next part of the syllabus. It's an English class, which means you're going to have quite a bit of writing. Don't be standoffish of that. One thing, I know that a lot of students are standoffish of that, especially those who are not English majors. So maybe your grammar's not what it should be, or maybe some of those other skills are maybe not what you would like them to be. But don't be standoffish of it because of that. We'll get through that. There are lots of student resources for you to improve in those areas. So it's not anything to worry about. But the English program, since this is an English course, wants you to be able to communicate clearly in writing. So there are going to be lots of writing assignments. It's wanting you to also be able to use all of those tools to synthesize information, to evaluate, to analyze, to critique. So we're going to see lots of that in this course. And we're going to want you to demonstrate an understanding of the literature itself. So those are the outcomes from the English program. But as far as the course is concerned, there's some very specific things that, are sure they're outcomes for the college, but they're also goals that I have for you also. One of those is the ability to define children's and adolescents' literature. So when we leave this course, you're going to know everything that you need to know about those things, especially to be successful in the classroom, or to go beyond that, to be able to select things for your own children or for your classroom. Next thing that we want you to have is some understanding of the history of children's literature, where that actually comes from. We have lots of old stories and tales and things like that that we'll explore up front in the course. Some of them are very, very, very old, but they were not necessarily written for children. They just kind of ended up that way. So we're going to deal a little bit with that. I want you to understand different types of genres as far as literature is concerned, because as you're all aware that it's not all equal. It may be equal in the fact that it's all fiction, or it may be equal in the fact that most of it be fantasy, but it really kind of appeals, just like as adults we like to read certain things, it's going to appeal to children the same way. So we're going to talk about that. Here's another one, cultural literacy. And I like this one because we live in a world that we really struggle with exclusivity and individuality. And sometimes we don't have an appreciation for that. So most of the pieces that I've selected for the course have a lot of culture in them, or cultural principles that maybe we take for granted. And just to help us to understand that other person that may not look like us, that may not speak like us, that may not have the same belief systems, the same background. So we want to be able to take children's literature and share that same kind of idea with our students. So we're going to definitely look at that. We also want to look at critical literacy, specifically in how we evaluate things. You'll notice when the week 1 folder opens up, there are some very religious type children's literature that are kind of that are put in there so that we can explore those. And you'll find that many times that literature, as you already know, is motivated. Nothing's written in a vacuum. We're always trying to kind of, I don't want to use the word force, but we're trying to inculcate people into certain belief systems. So I just want you to be able to look at those things, to be able to criticize it, to think about it critically, to know the things that are there that maybe you don't agree with, maybe you do, but that you will know that they are automatically happening. And that's part of the rhetoric thing that you all learned in English 1301. And last but not least, outcomes for the course, that you keep developing your college writing skills. Writing and communicating, especially in writing, is going to be paramount to your success anywhere. If you can communicate in writing, you're always going to keep climbing that chain towards those goals that you do have. Next section, ancillary text and reading. Now, when you flip to the next page, you're going to see that we have a pretty extensive reading list. But that's not all. There are lots of other stories and tales that, really finding them in a book form is kind of complicated and into one place. So what I've done is I've taken these pieces and placed them in there. And the first couple of weeks, while you're kind of working on gathering up your collection of books for the course, we'll work with these. Specifically because they're older and trying to deal with this kind of chronologically or by age. It's just a really good place to start. So you're going to find a collection that have some Aesop's fables, the Bible stories, as I talked about a minute ago, the Grimm or the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. There are some selections in there for those, and we'll work a little bit with those in the weeks to come. We're also going to deal with something that is very American. Most of the time, we only deal with fairy tales, the European style. I mean, that's what Disney has done so well. But we spend little time exploring the American versions of those. Okay, so we're gonna work with some of those also, and then some of the children's poetry, like nursery rhymes. I have some Mother Goose stuff in there, some limericks that we'll explore early on in the course before we really get into the heart of the literature itself, just so we can pull some things out. Now, we do have some required texts here, okay? And there are quite a few of them. So don't be intimidated by the reading list. They're easily done. Many of these are one-day readers, if not 3 or 4 hours at the most, that you could actually read across one of these if you have that time dedicated to just doing that. So I'm not going to go necessarily in order we're going to deal with them in the course, but kind of how they fall out on the list. The first one, and I know you're looking at this backwards, The House on Mango Street by Cisneros. Very popular book. Some of you may have read this while you were in high school. It's just a collection of vignettes that are put together. Very cultural in nature, but there are lots and lots of other motifs and themes that we can explore in this particular book. So I enjoyed it, read it several years ago, and the first time I read it, I actually read it with my wife. So interesting read. The next one on the list by Suzanne Collins, The Hunger Games. Most of us are very, very familiar with this book. And if we're not familiar with the book, we're definitely familiar with the movies. Now, the wonderful thing about this book as compared to the movies, and I hate to tell you this as an English teacher, but the movie follows this really, really well. So, except for a few things, and I think beyond that is it presents kind of a different perspective, or it kind of moves it a little bit, but it does stay fairly true to the novels themselves. But we're going to explore this one. As a matter of fact, this will be the last novel that we'll look at during the course. But throughout this, there will be discussions and things that you'll have to produce based on each of these readings. The next one, the BFG, interesting read. The thing I like about Dahl, he's also Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, if you're familiar with those movies, either the one with Johnny Depp or the one that's even older than that. But the thing I love about Dahl is his use of language, and he's created a very special language that is very, very useful in teaching children some of those symbols and things like that about language. Next piece, very, very old, The Jungle Books. Most of us, we're familiar with Mowgli and the movies, but The Jungle Books is a series of stories or short stories by Kipling. So there's far more than just Mowgli and Bagheera and all that. There are lots of other really unique stories, and we're going to deal with some of this also. Another cultural piece that I've chosen is Inside Out and Back Again. It's about a young Vietnamese girl during the Vietnam conflict, and her family are kind of forced to flee Vietnam. They're political refugees, and they go to Alabama and experience some serious bias against them, but they learn how to navigate it. So, really interesting read. The thing that's the most interesting is that when you're looking at all the pages look like this, you can read this book in a couple of hours because it looks almost verse-like, but it's written in the language of a little girl, so who's learning English. So I think you'll find that very, very interesting. Another piece I have is historical fiction. It can also be considered Holocaust fiction or Holocaust literature. It's about a young girl in Sweden, or Denmark rather, and her family, they're kind of forced to flee because they're Jewish. Very, very interesting read, but it's historical in the fact that it does create an illusion for us, but the story is not entirely true, but some of it really is. So, but it's an interesting read. One of my absolute favorites, A Wrinkle in Time, Madeleine L'Engle. She has created a very fantastical story that deals with all kinds of philosophy, some religious ideas. She mingles science in, and she kind of puts all these things together to create kind of I guess, a story that requires everything. Because you have some people that only believe in science. You have some people that are only into religion. But what she does is she ties it all together for us in a way that a young person could understand that it takes two to tango, if you will. It takes all of these different ideas to make an idea work. Next piece you guys may be familiar with, Bridge to Terabithia. I had not read this book. I came into teaching this course kind of late, and it was on one of my colleagues' book lists. And I was kind of stuck using their book list, and I had not read it until I was 52 years old. And I was blown away, and I thought, why in the world had I not read this book yet? It's a book that takes on some really tough issues and shares them with children about grief and loss and about friendship that I haven't seen in other works. Even adult pieces don't have the depth that this one does, but this is one of them we'll be exploring. Another one you may be familiar with, Esperanza Rising, very cultural in nature, very interesting read, so we'll be going through that. Another one of my favorites, The Little Prince, an older story, and most of these have some cartoon or some animated version, but they don't necessarily follow the book well. So don't rely on those things. Don't rely on YouTube. Rely on reading the book. Another book we're going to explore, very old, was very controversial in its time, and some of you may share this with your children, or maybe you had it shared with you, Where the Wild Things Are, by Maurice Sendak. Great illustrations, and it really kind of puts us into the mind of a child and how it operates, and how that child thinks and navigates the world early on. Next piece we have, which this is really one that we'll deal with, fairly early in the course, and it's children's poetry. And along the way, we're going to learn a little bit about each and every one of these authors, and you'll find that most of these authors are kind of unlikely as children's authors. Their lifestyle, like Silverstein here, he was pretty rough and tumble in his early days. When you hear a little of his biography, it will kind of shock you that we allow our children to read something from a guy like this, but that doesn't make it any less profound. Really good stuff here, and we'll be exploring that early on too. The next thing is that don't let the cover throw you. If you're not familiar with graphic novels, because that's exactly what this is also considered to be Holocaust literature. Now, it's a story that it's kind of got this dual storyline going on, or a dual plot. We have the guy who is writing about his father who endured the Holocaust, as a Jew. We'll discuss the other parts of why graphic novels may be something that you want to explore as a teacher, or if you're struggling to read yourself, graphic novels, taking the pictures and putting them with some words, may make it a little easier for a reader to understand certain concepts, but we'll be discussing that more. And last but not least on the list is the Alexander book, Alexander and His Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Bad Day. It's a picture book, very, very simple, but the concepts and the theme is huge. And along the way, maybe you can come up with some ideas as far as your teaching philosophy is concerned based on these types of literature. But that's the reading list, and we will get through them. Now, where to get those books? Since there is no standard textbook for children's literature, it's all about exploring the literature. You may have some of these. Others, I suggest you get them as cheaply as you possibly can. If that's Amazon, if it's Barnes & Noble, wherever you want to get them from is perfectly fine with me. I'm not going to make a plug for the bookstore, although they are available. I turn in my book list and they do the rest of the magic, but you're going to pay probably 3-4 times what they are actually worth or where you could get them somewhere else. But you do need to have the books, and you do need to be able to read them. You're going to have to devote a little bit of time every day to read them. Most of them, like I say, you can read in a very short amount of time. Now, there is another avenue for reading these books. Audible books are another good option. I think most of these are available as an Audible book, audible.com, or some of them you can pull from Amazon or those kinds of places. But make sure you read the books. Now, I guess I need to make a plug here for my videos. I try to make videos to overcome some of the issues in the course. Make sure you watch the videos. Watch the lecture videos, because they will help you with your writing assignments, and they will also help you with your final, because a lot of the material that I'm going to ask you about are going to come out of the lectures. So make sure that you watch the videos, take some notes, and everything will work out fine. So my videos are not professional. I make mistakes in them. I don't edit. I do one-take videos. Maybe somebody will come into my office while I'm making one. Don't worry about that. So just watch them. There's some value in that. Now let's talk a little bit about grades and the assignments. You'll notice here that there's a matrix here for the assignments and what we're going to be doing. I have it listed as focus questions here, but actually what that is discussion board participation. Every week I have a discussion board topic, and my expectation is that you respond to that. Because we don't have any other way to interact with one another, to have a class discussion, and discussion is so important to the learning process. So each week you'll have something you have to deal with in the discussion board, and you will also have to respond to at least 3 of your classmates. And we'll talk about the depth of those in a minute. So total for the course, that's going to be worth about 700 points of your grade, or roughly almost half, because the total point number for the course is going to be about 1,500 points. You're going to have 3 literary projects. So in other words, these are projects that aren't necessarily writing projects, but these are going to be things that you have to produce. We'll have a fairy tale project, which I'll get introduced to you guys early next week. There will be a poetry reading type project that you're going to have to participate in. And also, you're going to get your opportunity to be a best-selling author, because you're going to get to produce your own children's book. So those are really great projects. I always have really good feedback on them, and they can be a lot of fun if we allow them to be. Together, those are worth 300 points. So now we're at 1,000 points. You're also going to have 3 essays that you're responsible for during the course, and they are all associated with one of the literary projects. The first one will be a fairy tale analysis, which is associated with the fairy tale project, and all that will be, like I say, introduced to you next week early. We'll have a poetry analysis that goes along with your poetry reading, And then we have the big capstone term type paper that you'll have to write towards the end of the course. And so all of those together are worth 300 points. So now we're at 1,300 points. Then we have our final exam is going to be worth 200 points. So altogether, 1,500 for the course. Now, we're all familiar with the way grading works. 90 to 100 is an A. And you'll notice on the syllabus I've added the point value, where you have to be in order to get that A. 1,350 to 1,500 for an A. For a B, you've got to have 1,200 to 1,349. To get a C, you've got to have 1,050 to 1,199. And we won't talk about those below that because since this is a required course for many of you, you've got to make a C or better. So shoot for that. Okay, don't shoot for just getting through it. Shoot for doing well. As long as you turn in stuff on time and it's complete and it does have some level of good quality, you're going to finish fine. If you put a lot of effort into it, then you finish well. So shoot for what you absolutely know you need to have and then build on top of that. Now, discussion boards, they're paramount that we do them so that we can actually have discussion. The initial response to whatever the discussion question is will be due by midnight on Friday evening. That's important that you do that because I'm also requiring you to respond to at least 3 of your classmates. So if you don't respond by Friday evening, then those of your classmates that have may not have enough time to respond. So the initial response each week will be about 250 words. Sometimes, depending on the discussion, you may not have that tight of a parameter, but at least 250 words. And your responses to 3 other of your classmates will have to be at least 100 words apiece. So how you deal with the discussion, how you deal with the prompt for the discussion, that's entirely up to you. I've seen some of these discussion boards just go really crazy places, but they always end up being kind of pertinent and applicable to the course. So try to make sure that you do that. Since we're a web-based course, there's not really any requirement for class attendance. Now, I have heard in the past on some of my web courses, I wish that we would have got together on the first day, or maybe we can get together on the last day to take the final or something. You know, that's something that we can discuss later on in the course. If we want to do the final that way, that's entirely possible. I don't know that it works. There are 31 of us in this class, 32 if you count me. Getting 32 schedules to line up when it's not a face-to-face class, I'm not sure that we can do that, but I'm game for anything. So we'll try to work that out through the course. If there's a time that the class wants to meet or those who would like to meet who can, then maybe we can do that. But class attendance on a web course is logging into the Blackboard and doing your stuff. So make sure that you do that. If you don't log in for a week, that's like you didn't attend for a week. And if you let it go too far in logging into the Blackboard and keeping yourself up to date on your assignments and the readings and stuff, you're going to fall behind just like you would in a regular face-to-face course. So you got to set aside some time. And the good thing about a web course is you can do it 3 o'clock in the morning if you want to. But make sure that you set aside time to get into the course. I do need to make a plug about academic integrity. You do turn in things into the Blackboard, which means they go through a system and it's going to pick out any matches and bring up issues with plagiarism or academic integrity. Just don't draw a target on yourself. Don't get yourself into that situation. Do your own original work. All of the essays that I'm going to ask you for require source material. So make sure that you cite those properly and find them from the appropriate locations. Now, the next thing I need to talk about are your sources. Since they will all have a requirement to have sources, I want you to stay off of the open web. All of us have access to the library databases. We have access to all kinds of books and periodicals and things like that That's what I want you to use. I do know that the inclination with literature for many students, since a lot of them don't have a lot of experience in tearing this stuff apart and unpacking it and talking about it, that they tend to go to the open web and see what somebody's written about this. Don't do that. Challenge yourself. What you have to say about a piece of literature, what you pick apart about it, is just as important as any literary critic. So stay off the open web, stay off of the homework websites. There are lots of them. Help Me 123, schmoop.com are just a couple. And much of the material that's there is already plagiarized. So stay away from those. Do your own scholastic, scholarly type work to produce the sources and the ideas that go into the papers that you turn in. So I'm never going to bend on the homework websites or the open web. So please don't use those. Use good, solid, credible sources. If you have a source you want to use, and maybe it does come from the open web, you're going to find that there are some things on the open web that are credible. When we're dealing with the Grimms or Hans Christian Andersen, there are some websites that have done lots of work on kind of exposing and exposing some of their work. So there's some good scholarly stuff there. But if you're not quite sure, ask, call me, email me, come by my office, and we'll discuss it. We'll look at it together and see, is this a credible source? Is this something that I want to use in my paper? The next thing is about the text in the course. We've already talked about those. You got to read them, okay? Now, I do understand, for many of you, you're taking this course because it's convenient, but you still have to put a little bit of time into reading to make sure that you're able to complete the course assignments and to synthesize the material. And most of these you'll find, if you've not read them, when you start to read them, you really enjoy them. And if you have children, many of these you can share with your children. Now, on the syllabus, about late assignments. Now, the way the syllabus is written, and we got to have rules. Turning in things on time is going to ensure your success. Now, I'm not just, crazy rigid. I will take late work from you, okay? But I'm not going to chase you down to turn it in. I will take late work. The second that it is late, I'll take 20 points as a late penalty. And I'll let you go 7 days. So let's say another week transpires and you haven't turned something in. Now I'm adding another 10 points automatically because it's late. So now we start at 70 to grade instead of 80 or 100. So I will take late work on everything except the discussion boards. If you miss the discussion board, it's really hard to go back because the whole class has moved on. So no lates on the discussion board, but I will tell you the discussion board is the easiest grade you can ever get. Just participate at the level and the depth you're supposed to, and it's easy 50 points on each one of them. But as far as late, the discussion board, when we move on, we move on. But the other papers, assignments, I'll take them up and I'll publish a date when I won't take them anymore. But I will take late work because I do understand that things come up or you get busy or whatever. I will take them, but there will be a late penalty. And I start with 20 points the second it's late, and then each week after that, I take 10 points. And finally, you get to the point where it's not worth anything, and I haven't even started grading it. So, that's a decision you have to make. You have to be strategic and engaged in your own education. So I'll leave that to you. I'll help you a little bit, but as far as integrity of the course, we kind of have to go that way. Grade changes. I try to watch grades closely. Before I post grades, I try to scrutinize them and make sure that we're not missing anything. But anywhere along the way, because each time I grade something, it's going to pop up in the grade book in the Blackboard, make sure you're watching your stuff. If you disagree with something, you can always bring it up to me and I'll explain to you why I graded it a certain way. That doesn't mean you're going to get your way, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Okay, so, and I'm willing to entertain that. But watch your grades. Don't get down to where I posted a grade at the end of the course and you say something's missing. I try to do a good job at keeping in track, but it takes an act of Congress and God to change a grade, as you are aware. So let's make sure that we watch it along the way so that we don't run into any problems at the end. And some of you will graduate in midterms, the last course you need. We don't want anything that's going to mess this thing up. Okay, so make sure you're watching your stuff as we go. There's an ADA statement here about accommodations for students that may have some special things. It's an online class, so I can't think of anything that would come up. The next thing is about distance education. We have that equal access to everything that a face-to-face student has. So anything that you need, the university is going to make sure that you have access to. Now, last but not least is the tentative schedule for the class. And I say it's tentative because sometimes we have to change things. Sometimes we have to move things around just because we're going to get more value out of it. Or something catastrophic happened, like those students that are supposed to start at A&M Corpus Christi on Monday. They're just not probably going to be able to start on Monday. So we've already have to make adjustments there for them. So, I mean, we're no different. Any number of things can happen. But this is a tentative schedule that kind of keeps you in line with what we're going to be looking at over the course of the 16 weeks that we're going to be together. The Blackboard is also set up for by the week, so you can follow that. I won't open the next week until we close out 1 week. And the reason for that is so you don't, first of all, so you're not intimidated, because there's always this much more material, and I don't want you to be intimidated that way. And I think that we really have to kind of clean up what we're doing before we move on. So they'll open every Sunday night at midnight as soon as we close out the 1 week. Now the assignments, the bigger assignments, the literary projects, and the writings, I'll put those up as I assign them, and then when that one's done, we'll go with the next one. So, but this tentative schedule will kind of keep you on track, so you can kind of look down the road, know what we're going to be reading, have an idea of what kind of assignments are going to be due, and just to kind of keep us on track. But once again, I reserve the right to change things as we need to change them. I don't change them just for my own, on my own agenda. I change them when it benefits us all. If it's not going to benefit us all, then I'm not going to mess with it. But if it does benefit us all, then we'll make those changes if there's something to be gained from it. So in early next week, I will get the initial lecture videos put up. We will open the first assignments, and you'll be ready to move on with the course. I'm excited to get started. Lots of really neat things. You're probably going to do some things for this course that you've never done in another web course. Like you're going to get to do the same thing that I do, make a video of yourself, and share that with the group, which may be a little uncomfortable, but it's okay to be outside of your comfort zone. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call or come by my office or email, and we can work all of those things out. But I'm excited to start, and I guess that's all about all I have for this particular video in this session. I know it's very long, and as you'll see in my lecture videos, I am not very brief. It's okay to fast forward me a little bit. That works fine, but just try to make sure that you catch as much of it as you absolutely can. So good luck with the course. I'm excited to see what you guys have to say and what you find in the literature. And along the way, I will participate in some of the projects, like the poetry reading. I'll participate in that, possibly the picture book and things like that. So, all right, well, good luck, and I will be talking to you.